Welcome in to another Monday edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. John Alden with you, as always, and happy early New Year. This is the final episode of In Touch before we get to 2025, and what I guess half a year it's been. I mean, this is episode number 66, and we began this show back in the middle of July, basically coinciding with Big Ten football media days. And we've been on a heck of a journey so far. And I guess we'll hit our 6-month anniversary, if that's not even a technical term. People say that all the time. Like if you're in a relationship, you say you're having your blank month anniversary. Doesn't the word anniversary like mean a year? Like the an in anniversary is like short for annual. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I do a lot of that. But yeah, we're getting close to 6 months of doing this show. And I've enjoyed every last bit of it for the most part, right? There's always moments that you wish you could take back or do better or things you want to improve upon. And of course, it's what we'll do heading into the new year as well, as be thinking about different ways we can continue to improve the show. And I'm happy with where it's at so far. But of course, I'm not satisfied with you never want to be satisfied with anything that you do, especially in a business like this, where you're always constantly trying to improve your product so that those who have been with you, whether they're since the beginning or just now, they want a reason to stick with you, right? And I appreciate all of you who have, whether you found me from day one and you already knew who I was, or if you discovered this show just through Hoosier Illustrated and following guys like Alec and Kyler and the rest of the staff, and you've latched on via them. Of course, I thank them for that platform, but thank you for tagging along. And I appreciate each of you who listen Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But of course, no Wednesday show again this week due to the New Year's holiday. And we'll get back to our regularly scheduled program, or release schedule, I should say, once we get into the new year. And also with that, this will also more than likely be the last time for a while that the show releases this early. I know the last few shows I've been able to release in the earlier hours in the morning, just because I do knock out, or I've been knocking out these shows in the night before, just because of my current schedule at work being a little more hectic than usual. But that's just because people are on taking the last of their vacation, people who save it up for the end of the year, that type of thing. But of course, things will go back to normal beginning on January 2nd. And that'll give me some more room. I'm actually looking forward to not feeling like I have to rush these out. That's one thing that I get concerned about with some of these late, when I say late night, it's only 8:30-ish p.m. recording this part right now. I just don't like to feel like I'm rushed, especially when there's still games going on. Like I was pulling up college basketball scores earlier, and WKU versus Michigan is still going on. Imagine if I was wanting to react to, one of the college football playoff matchups, if that was going on tonight. I know it's not, but those will be going on later on this week, and we'll preview a little bit of those. I'll give my thoughts on who I think will advance to the I guess it'd be the semifinals at that point. And we'll do a few other things as well. What do we got? First of all, apologies for the potential extra pauses you may see today. I've got kind of a cough-ish going on. I don't feel sick. I don't really feel bad in any way, but pretty much all day today, meaning yesterday at the time of this release, been kind of dealing with something in my throat that's been making me cough every so often. Been taking some Ricola. I've taken a few of those today to try to ease the coughing fits, and then also chewing some gum, not currently, of course, and then drinking a ton of water. So hopefully I can push through this episode without having to pause and overtly, or too much. What am I looking for here? Too many times. I should just stop spitting out word vomit. Just say it as simple as possible, right? Try to sound too fancy with my words sometimes. And yeah, we're having a good time right here on on a Monday. What else? I already mentioned last show that we'll be releasing earlier in the day. But I do want to get into, excuse me, there we go. I do want to get into a few quick hitters here in just a second. There it is. There's that cough I was talking about. Let's take a drink of water too. All right. We'll get through this. And I'm sure some of you out there are dealing with some variation of sickness as well. I already know several people, whether it be family members or just friends that we know from various places, coworkers, have been getting sick in one way or another. So this is that time of year where if you're going to get sick, and or if you haven't been sick, there's a good chance you might, I guess. Hopefully it's not the case for you though. But let's get into a couple of quick hitters. One more somber thing, and then one that's kind of a more of a funny thing to kind of balance some things out. But I'm going to start with reflecting a little bit on the passing of legendary broadcaster Greg Gumbel. After 52 years of broadcasting, he passed away at the age of 78 back on December 27th. Died of cancer in his home down in Davie, Florida. Many people, myself included, are familiar with Gumbel as kind of being the voice of Selection Sunday. If you're a college basketball fan, which of course, with many of you guys watching being Hoosier fans, I'm sure that is likely how you relate to being familiar with Greg Gumbel as well, and just kind of being that friendly voice. I think one of the most, I was going to say underrated qualities, but I don't think that's the right word to use for this. I think it's one of the more endearing qualities, maybe that's what I should say, of any broadcaster is the friendly voice. And there's so many different types of personalities out there. You have those who are abrasive and those who really just love to shove their opinion in their face. And then you have the other end of things where you get guys like Greg Gumbel. I would throw Ernie Johnson. I believe that's his last name. Forgive me if those listening know who I'm referring to and I'm saying his name wrong. It's the NBA, the guy who hosts NBA. It used to be on TNT, but it's not. Inside the NBA. There's so many friendly voices in broadcasting. I think Greg Gumbel is one of those. Gumby, also nicknamed by some of his colleagues, but we'll definitely miss seeing him on the selection show in really any remaining season for college basketball because he won't be there moving forward. Yeah, I was looking. I was seeing people post some of their favorite moments of Greg Gumbel announcing their team making the field on Selection Sunday, and if you can, that shows the power of a good, broadcaster in whatever form it may be. Whenever the way that they describe the team that you root for, us doing it a certain way, and it kind of makes you feel good or, feel a certain type of way. That's I think that's what drew me into broadcasting in the first place. And I'm about to name somebody that many of you probably don't like. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel like this person used to be more popular years ago, specifically for his work in March Madness, not for the same reasons as Greg Gumbel, of course, but Mr. Gus Johnson. The way that he used to get, not even used to, but the way that he gets so excited, and beginning back with his March Madness calls that he was, excuse me, that he was made famous for. That's what people remember a lot of. I mean, they remember the shot, but they'll remember how those who were calling the game, how they decide to portray themselves, right? And I think nowadays, some people kind of think Gus Johnson's shtick, if you will, is a little forced for Fox College Football. And I think there are some cases where that may be true. But I mean, he's always going to be part of his broadcasting personality. He's kind of being over the top and having fun while doing so. I remember I think he was doing the Ohio State Michigan game earlier this year. And it sounded like this maybe sound harsh. It sounded like he was about to collapse when he was reacting to I think it was an interception, if I remember correctly. But he was like, it's intercepted. Blah, blah, blah. That's probably not a good impression of it, but I do remember that being something that happened. And many people thinking, like, what has gotten into Gus Johnson? But nonetheless, I've now turned this I guess reflecting segment, if you will, into something that wasn't even really about Greg Gumbel. I mean, it was, and about his friendly personality, but I ended up turning it into something else, as I often do on this show, as I sit here and gather my own thoughts and typically go down into branching pathways that some of you may follow and some of you may wonder, what the hell is he doing? This John guy who does this show, what exactly is he talking about? Where is he going to take us down today? Let's maybe get back on the rails, right? But in doing that, I'm going to take us into a direction, like, again, going from a little reflecting, something a little more somber, to something a little more fun, as I take another cough break here real quick. I'm going to mute my microphone this time. If this gets too bad, I may try to edit some of that out, because I don't want to have too many, especially if they're more frequent than I would like them to be. But hopefully that will not be the case. I'll try to drink as much water during as many moments as I can. And that's the beautiful thing about a podcast, right? This isn't a radio show. This is at my own pace, and I don't have to worry about, I need to be more comfortable with the dead air on occasion. And let's get back on the rails here. So this is the other quick hitter that I wanted to mention before we kind of get into some more, I was gonna say serious things, but really, is anything we talk about on this show really all that serious? We're talking about sports, college athletics for the most part on the show. But I want to dip my toe into, I guess, the NFL, but not really talking about anything on the field, right? But I do want to point out something that's been really fun to kind of see on social media. And I would play this. I would play a video of this if I could without getting flagged, but I probably would if I did. But I'm sure many of you, if you're NFL fans, you have seen the Minnesota Vikings doing these very random Disney dances or celebrations, whether they get a touchdown or an interception. But a couple of these, first of all, they're very well done, and they're very, I guess, to use a phrase I've already said once today, over the top. And a couple of examples. If you haven't seen these, you should look them up. But the one that I saw that initially, I guess, went viral this was a week or so ago, when the Vikings got a game-winning interception. And I don't think it was the entire team, but there was a decent amount of players who all got in front of the camera and started doing the Camp Rock. I'm sure many of you, if you're older, probably don't even know what movie I'm referring to, but there was a Disney movie back whenever I was a child called Camp Rock, and there was this weird dance. I don't even know how to do it. If you just look up Vikings Camp Rock dance, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But it's this very cringy, I guess, moment in the movie, just super weird and uncomfortable to kind of watch. When you're a kid, you don't think so, of course, but the Vikings players recreated that dance as a celebration, and it's hilarious and just great way to go viral on social media, if I do say so myself. And then they did another one this week where they decided to do the "We're All in This Together" dance from the original High School Musical movie, of course, another Disney Channel movie. And again, choreographed and everything. Another large group of Vikings players on the field celebrating, doing the Disney movie dance again for that particular song. I think it's funny. I hope they continue to do more, and it's given me a reason to root for the Vikings in some way, shape, or form. Again, many of you know that I just kind of root for random teams every now and again. Of course, I'll always be rooted in the Bills for my wife, and I'm glad that they're having the season that they're having, and hope that they make a run at the Super Bowl. But if it's not the Bills, man, I want to see more of this Vikings nonsense, because I'll take these elaborate dances that many people probably look at, especially, people who are older than me, people probably in their late 30s or older, look at that and they're probably, maybe they laugh at it, maybe they think it's stupid, but I think it's funny getting, just taking things that are just really out of the blue kind of, and making some fun content out of it. So wanted to point that out because I thought that stuff was funny. All right, let's get into, some real serious stuff. We're going to talk about. I wish I had a little dun 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 sounder, because we're going to talk about Indiana basketball. Oh my gosh, it's so scary. This Indiana basketball team. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they going to miss the NCAA tournament once again? They were in yet another close game with a non-conference opponent that they probably should have taken care of, and they didn't. They won the game, but it was way too close for comfort. Have we seen this movie before? We absolutely have, time and time again. And I'll say this, I'm pretty sure I've said this before, and I may even say it later on whenever I bring on Kyler Staley for his segment. But Mike Woodson teams, even though they don't always look good doing what they're doing, they miss shots, they run the floor and look like they shouldn't be running the floor, they don't always play good defense, but by golly, they've never lost to a non-conference opponent at the G5 level or lower. I'm kind of making myself laugh with these random coughs that just evaporate out of my system and into the ether that are now getting presented to you on YouTube. But yeah, Indiana basketball. I think this is so, for those of you who watched the post-game wrap-up show, and I know in many cases, no matter if it's this particular show or whether you're a fan of something else and they have a daily show and a post-game show, the audience is not always the same. But if you are somebody who takes in the post-game wrap-up show as well as the In Touch with Indiana Sports Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it wasn't my favorite post-game show performance, if you will, by me. There was a moment at the very end where I was going to try to wrap things up with a specific point, and during the live recording of that show, because we do many of those shows live, I completely went blank and just forgot what I was going to say as I was wrapping things up. And I don't know if I was uncomfortable or what it was, because sometimes you have a thought right there and it just whoosh, escapes you. It's happened on this show before, but thankfully, many times if it happens in a bad way, I can just pause and think about it for a second and then continue on recording. I try not to do that because I feel like it does take away from some of the magic of the show, if you will. One thing I do like about what I've done with the show is I think it's very raw in the sense that I don't like to, there's not a lot of effects. I don't do a whole lot of editing with it. It's just kind of what it is. It's my thoughts. I talk to people on occasion, usually at least once a show. And, it's up to you guys from there. We do YouTube comments, all that sort of thing. But when you do things live, sometimes things don't always go well. You have to take it and just kind of, deal with it, move on, hope you don't make that mistake again. But the point that I wanted to make on the post-game wrap-up show with Dylan was that inconsistency has become this team's identity. And when you are walking into this portion of the schedule, if you're Indiana and other teams that are wanting to compete for the top level of the conference look more polished and ready to take on the Big Ten, and you don't, that's not a position that is ideal. And I know I'm not saying anything groundbreaking, but I'm just letting people, even though there is still time for this Indiana team to figure things out, this is not the place that you want to be in at this point in time as you're getting ready for conference play. Now, granted, or thankfully, I guess if you're Indiana, the first team you're playing, Rutgers, is also a team that has had some issues heading into or, as they head into this portion of their season as well. And Rutgers, similar to Indiana, began in the preseason top 25, had some results that didn't go their way. But they, like Indiana, have talent. And talent can help you win games a lot of the time, especially when you're playing inferior opponents. But when you're getting into the thick of the conference, not only do you need talent, but you need cohesion, you need consistency, you need good coaching, and you need to be able to put it all together more often than not if you're going to be one of the top teams in the conference. And so Thursday is going to be Indiana's first opportunity to do that. And Rutgers, I'm sure, is feeling the same way. You want to right the ship now before it's too late. And I won't talk too much more about that because Kyler, Staley, and I are going to get into kind of the details of what's to come for the Hoosiers. And just, for reference, I know sometimes I try to let people know, like, hey, I recorded this segment the night before. Well, that's what happened. Or I guess you're all aware that I'm recording this entire show the night before, but I recorded it basically immediately after I did the post-game wrap-up show with Dylan. So he comes to us live from outside of Assembly Hall. We're kind of just reacting as we normally do, as if it were another segment on the post-game wrap-up show. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. And then also with the Umar Ballo stuff, I do bring it up with Kyler as well. Not a lot to react to in terms of, like, I guess there's nothing. How do I say this without, because I'm not a reporter, right? I can give my opinion, but Kyler is, and I'm not. So I'm not trying to say that none of us are reporters, but I guess I talk about making fun of the talking heads a lot. I guess I'm just a talking head, right? I'm your average Joe talking head, has a microphone in his house and does a show for a website called Hoosier Illustrated. So things I want to say about the Umar Ballo situation, I won't necessarily say right now. If things get confirmed and it becomes a bigger deal later, maybe I will. But I'm sure many of you have your own thoughts on it as well. There's just, it is what it is. Sometimes people, and I'm not, again, as I'm saying this, I'm not saying I know for sure because I don't. I'm just talking about in hypotheticals. People make mistakes, and there's always going to be consequences for those in the real world or in the basketball world, whatever it may be. And that's just reality. That's just life. So I'll leave that be, and that'll be all I say on that matter. And for those of you who may not know what I'm referring to, just go look up anything. Go look up anything I was just referring to, whether it be on Twitter, Google. You'll find somebody writing about it, talking about it, and you can hear more commentary on it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and transition into Kyler Staley's segment and continue this conversation on Indiana basketball and the road ahead for the Hoosiers as they make their way into Big Ten conference play as we turn the calendar over from 2024 to 2025. Joining us now, it is Kyler Staley of HoosierIllustrated.com, basketball recruiting analyst Kyler Staley, I should say, talking to us shortly after Indiana's 77-68 win against Winthrop. And I guess we'll just start with another inconsistent performance for the Hoosiers, right? Something we've kind of gotten used to in the Mike Woodson era with these types of games. But the one silver lining that I mentioned on the post-game wrap-up show with Dylan is that even though these games have been fairly ugly and it doesn't give you a lot to necessarily get excited about for things moving forward, one thing that is true that Archie Miller can't say and Tom Crean cannot say is that Mike Woodson has never lost any of these games. Even though they're too close for comfort, they did find a way to win. And I know I'm kind of sounding a little more cheery than I probably want to, but it is at least a positive way to look at this game, right?
Absolutely. And first of all, I want to apologize if there's a lot of noise in the background.
It's not really that invasive, if I'm being honest.
Okay, well, that's so. Good. The loud assembly hall, people exiting and everything. But you nailed it. Inconsistency. That's Indiana. That's the story of this Indiana team. And honestly, that's probably the theme of this Indiana team. And you just got to get used to it at this point. I think this is the problem. So, and you touched on a good point. Mike Woodson has never lost these types of games, they've been very close, too close for comfort. But Mike Woodson definitely does figure out ways to win these games. And at the end of the day, it may not be the 20-plus point wins that people really, really want to see out of this Indiana team, but you got to respect the fact at the end of the day that this Indiana team finds ways to win games. I'm going to give major credit because I've been the guy that's been harping on the defense of Indiana, I feel like, nonstop ever since the start of the season. I'm going to give them major credit because the final 3 minutes of the game when Indiana was only up 69-68, they held Winthrop scoreless the final 3 minutes of the game. And that's what you do to win games. That's what a winning team does. They figure out ways to get stops when they need to get stops. And that's what Indiana did versus Winthrop. But, here's the thing. It's like the non-conference is over, right? You're going to go into conference play. It isn't about winning games by 15-plus points, 20-plus points. It's about winning games, period. And that's what Indiana has to do. You got to win ugly, and it's not going to be pretty a lot of times. This Indiana team is not pretty. They got a lot of talent on their team. And that's just the thing it is. And the more people, I should say, the less that people just, keep complaining about that, the better it's going to be. Just respect the fact that Indiana is going to find ways to win games this year. Going into Big Ten play is what the hope is. But Indiana now goes into conference play. The opportunity for them to get big wins is there now. Non-conference is over. It's time to focus on conference play. And Indiana just has to find ways to get wins these next 2 months.
And that's true. And again, it all starts with Rutgers on Thursday, and we'll talk more about that later on. But I do want to talk more about the game in question specifically. One thing that really stood out to not only me, I'm sure Indiana fans in general, 1 for 20 from the three-point line. Your only three-point make was Luke Goody at the beginning of the game. And from there on out, it was a lid on the basket. And I do not understand why this team cannot hit shots. I don't think they're taking bad shots. It's almost like they're just thinking about shooting the ball too much, and maybe they'll eventually get out of this slump that they're in. But it baffles me that they can be so poor at shooting the three ball sometimes.
There was a stretch earlier part of the season where Indiana was shooting around 37-38% from three. So things were looking good right there, but they are in a slump right now. And it was comically bad watching them shoot the three ball today. And here's the thing. All the looks that they take, this is a team that really prides themselves on getting good looks, and they do get good looks. They cannot convert right now, and that's the problem. But Miles Rice touched on it a little bit in the post-game presser. He says, it kind of goes both ways. When you see the ball go in, the whole team's like, yes, that feels good or whatever. But when you see the ball go out, then it does kind of hurt the confidence a little bit. And that's the case with it. But Indiana's shooting, 16 to 20 threes a game. So throwing that, I think that's a perfect number to shoot the three ball. But, I think that they're going to hit. I mean, there's some good shooters on this team. And Baco, Goody, and, Rice has shown that he's capable of hitting the three ball from time to time. This team will figure it out. They'll make shots. As long as they keep getting good looks, they will hit shots. But tonight, comical. So, but at the same time, you want to give credit to Indiana's offensive rebounding because they missed a lot of shots. And at one point, they had 12 offensive rebounds. I don't know what they finished at. They had 12 offensive rebounds and then had 14 second chance points. So if you're going to miss some three balls, you better be willing to get some offensive rebounds. And that's what Indiana did tonight.
Also, I want to talk about two of the most important players for tonight, or I should say last night's game, if you're talking about when this is getting released, were two players off the bench. One being Langdon Hatton, who is filling in for Umar Bala, which we'll get to that here in a second as well. And then Bryson Tucker having another one of his good games. Bryson Tucker, we talk about this Indiana team being inconsistent. Bryson Tucker will go from having a good game to a bad game, to a good game to a bad game. This being one of his good games. And again, that's going to happen with a freshman. And then you throw in Langdon Hatton, somebody who normally doesn't see a lot of minutes, but gets kind of thrust into this position due to some, I guess you could say, unforeseen circumstances potentially. And he absolutely thrives whenever he gets in the game tonight. Again, last night, I should say.
Yeah, so I want to start with Bryson Tucker. I mean, the perfect word you just said was freshman, right? Every freshman's going to go through that. Jalen Hood-Schifino went through that. There's been Kinsey and Baco went through that. Freshmen of that kind of level are going to go through that, and especially a freshman that's kind of I wouldn't say he doesn't have a role on this team, but the guy that just goes in there and just, gets his game going. Yeah. And that's what he did last night. He got his game going, and he showed some really spectacular stuff, I think, on both ends of the floor. Mid-range game was good. I thought he had a couple of good rebounds. He was, cutting off the ball really, really well. Bryson Tucker, it's just going to be one of those things with him. It's going to be inconsistency with him, and that's just something you're just going to have to deal with, honestly, at times, because, he's going to play. Mike Woodson's going to play him, and there's going to be some good Bryson Tucker, and there's going to be some bad Bryson Tucker, but hopefully the good outweighs the bad, as the season progresses. And then Langdon Hatton, that guy's always going to be ready to play when his name is called, right? I mean, we've seen it at the Bahamas, I remember. There's been a few games here and there where his name is called, he comes in and gives you max effort. And that's just what it takes for, a team to be successful, is having guys like that, like Anthony Leal, guys that just are ready to play whenever their name is called and giving that max effort. Langdon Hatton, he's playing for his dream school or whatnot. He's not going to take any moment lightly. He's going to come in there. He's going to compete his butt off. And tonight, stepping in for Umar Ballo, who was out this game, it gives you kind of comfort to know that, if Omar Ballo's out for a game, you got someone like Langdon Hatton who can kind of, fill that break glass in case of emergency type of role.
And Mike Woodson mentioned in the press conference that he wasn't going to address, at least tonight, he wasn't going to address Umar Ballo's absence. And I'm not asking you to give me any sort of scoop or whatever, but I guess just thoughts on the comment on how this kind of looks for Ballo and maybe him with the not trying to assume anything, but moving forward, how do you see this kind of affecting the team? I guess maybe that's not the best question to ask, but
obviously I don't want to speculate and everything. There are rumors going around, and anybody that's listening to this has probably already heard the rumors of what happened the night before. I guess there's a picture going around and stuff, but I mean, here's the thing. It's like it shows to me that Mike Woodson, he's going to, how do I want to phrase this? He's going to discipline when he needs to discipline. Let's say that. And then again, you or I, nobody really knows until it comes out of the words of Mike Woodson or Umar Ballo. Nobody really knows what happened with this, why he missed today's game. But I kind of want to just kind of parlay that back to, Langdon Hatton, a guy that's just always going to be ready when his name is called. So I don't think this is going to be a common thing. Hopefully, knock on wood, with an injury or anything like that. But it just goes down to Indiana's depth. When someone like Omar Ballo's out, someone like Malik Renew, who's hardly ever misses a game. I don't think he's missed a single game in his career. When those guys are out, they have the depth to work around. And tonight, you saw a pretty interesting starting lineup with Mackenzie Mbako moving to the floor, Luke Goody, being thrusted into that starting lineup, and then big minutes from Langdon Hatton. It just shows, anything can happen throughout this season. Injury, knock on wood, nothing of that happens. But injury, discipline, anything like that, the team will be ready to adapt to however they can. And I don't think it's going to be a long issue with Ballo. If it is whatever people think it is, I would expect him to be ready to go when it comes to this Rutgers game this Thursday.
And I've talked about how important this kind of opening stretch of the next part of the conference schedule is. You have Rutgers at home, a Rutgers team that has talent, but kind of similar to Indiana. They've had their share of struggles this season. You go on the road against a Penn State team right after that who already has an upset victory over Purdue. And then you'll face one of the former Pac-12 schools in USC back in Simon Scott Assembly Hall right after that. How crucial do you think it is for Indiana to, I would say at the very least, win 2 out of those 3?
I think it's very crucial. I think the whole month of January is pretty crucial for Indiana. If you go back the last 4 years, January has not been the best month for a Mike Woodson-led team. Let's just be honest with you. They really struggle in the month of January, and then they have to kind of, play absolutely perfect when it comes to February. Last year was just a little bit too late. They didn't get on a roll. They didn't hit their peak until the very, very end of the season when it was all said and done and they weren't going to make the NCAA tournament. And they have to start off really, really hot in January. Rutgers, like you said, is a good team. Obviously got those 2 freshmen that will come in and be ready to compete. Rutgers is also a team that Indiana struggled with going all the way back to the Archie Miller era.
Yeah.
It's a team that they just really struggle with, no matter if it's home or not. But, Rutgers is a very Jekyll and Hyde team. Indiana, to a certain extent, is the same way. But with it being at home, a Big Ten, game should be a pretty good environment. Indiana's got to take care of business. At Penn State, that's going to be a little tougher because Penn State, another team that Indiana struggled with as of late these last few years, a really, really tough team. It has a different Penn State team than what you've seen in years past. They've got some players on there. Ace Baldwin, a guy that could win, Big Ten Player of the Year that they'll be going up against. So, I don't know if 2 out of the 3 is really what you need to circle in on. It's just the whole month of January. Indiana's got to get some wins. They got to rattle off a lot of wins in January and kind of, pump the brakes on this bubble talk or anything like that. get some quality wins, tons of quality wins, on tap for the Big Ten season. This Big Ten league is just so deep, and I think it's a lot deeper than what it was last year by far. And there's a lot of quality wins. When you talk about the net ratings and things like that, Indiana, like I said, it doesn't need to be 20-plus point wins or anything. They just got to win, and especially if they can find ways to win on the road, that's going to be huge for their NCAA resume. So, looking into Big Ten play, the month of January is crucial for Indiana. You can't dig yourself a hole in the month of January and expect to climb all the way back out when it comes to February, because honestly, them being on the bubble is going to do no good for this team. They've got to be, solidly in, and it starts in January with Big Ten play.
Yeah, while you're talking about the month of January, just a quick little look at what's ahead other than those first 3 games. Your home games include, of course, Rutgers and USC. You have a chance for a marquee victory against a really good Illinois team at home later on, and at the midway point of the month. You'll play Maryland on the 26th. And that does it for your home games, at least when it comes to January. And then road tests against Penn State, as we mentioned prior, Iowa on the 11th, Ohio State, who is coming off a pretty good win against Kentucky. And, of course, they also beat Indiana State earlier this week. Or that might have been today, if I'm not mistaken. And then you got Northwestern on the road. And, of course, you're gonna finish off the month of January with your first of 2 matchups against Purdue, this one being on the road, of course. So, like you mentioned, plenty of opportunity to get those wins that you're looking for, because as you've mentioned in some of your write-ups, Kyler, and we've talked about on this show, no marquee wins to speak of at this point in the season. And that's not something that Mike Woodson teams are necessarily unfamiliar with. It's still not something that you like to have, or I guess should say not have in your back pocket at this point in the season. It just means you have that much more work to do. But again, plenty of opportunities in the month ahead, and then you still have the entire month of February after that. But of course, 1 month at a time, right? And then one game at a time, if we're even going with that route.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the main part of the schedules here, right? The non-conference is what it is. Indiana, they had a lot of bye games. Bahamas didn't look too well. People still have a sour taste with that Louisville loss. You got to put that behind. And that's what this Indiana team's doing. They're putting it behind them. They're looking at a game at a time. All the players, from the players to the coaching staff, they're looking at this at a game at a time. Plenty of opportunity for Indiana still, and there's still so much season left. So it ain't panic time. Like a lot of it, I wouldn't even say most. A lot of Indiana fans are, strictly panic button. We got to, cut everybody, fire everyone. That's just not the case right now. Get through the Big Ten play, see what this Indiana team can do. They have the most talent out of any team in the Big Ten, and it's time for them to put it together. Starts on the defensive end for me. If they can be consistently on the defensive end, that offense been really, really good so far this year. I think it'll open up a lot more things, but take it at a game at a time. No game on the Big Ten slate is going to be an easy win. There's going to be absolutely zero easy wins for Indiana this year. It's just time to see what this team can do. Be tough, be disciplined, and limit the mistakes, on the floor, and we'll just see what happens with this Indiana team. But last thing I'll say, a lot of opportunity left, so don't panic yet. This team could just be fine, when it's all said and done.
I do like your optimism. I think you throw a lot of good points out there, and I do worry though. This Rutgers game worries me, just because of if things don't go the way that fans want. Because if they don't win this game on Thursday, the panic button will be hit, whether it's by us or it doesn't matter if it's hit by us or not. Those who have already been loud are going to get louder and louder and louder. And to some point, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, because, the product eventually needs to reflect, I guess, what the program strives to be. But we'll talk about that at a later date. We're running out of time. Kyler, you've given me plenty of your time this evening, and I appreciate it. And we'll probably do a wrap up on Thursday talking about this Rutgers game that we keep referring to.
Yes, absolutely. 8:30 back at the hall. So Big Ten play is here. I'm ready for it. Let's just see if this Indiana team's ready for it.
That's right. Kyler Staley of HoosierIllustrated.com. Follow along on Twitter. He's always covering high school basketball as well, following the latest and greatest when it comes to Indiana prep hoops, and also following along with what's going on with, of course, who Indiana's targeting when it comes to potential guys who may be on the team in future seasons. So, Kyler, have a safe trip home.
Thank you, man.
Big thank you to Kyler Staley, as always, for taking the time to come on and chat basketball. And I know he wasn't feeling the greatest as well, so big shout out for him taking a few minutes to talk Hoosiers. And hopefully we have some more fun things to talk about going into the rest of the season. I don't want this to be a miserable basketball season. I am glad that the non-conference slate is over. Pretty much one of the least fun non-conferences we've had in a while. I know last year wasn't very fun as well when you think about the Auburn blowout, and I believe they was last year. Yeah, last year was Kansas at home, and that was a good game. And they ended up not coming away with that win, if I remember correctly. But I remember that being a really good game for Trey Galloway. Yeah, it was right. It was one of Trey Galloway's best games of his career, but Indiana wasn't able to get the job done. I remember talking about that. Not on this show, of course. It didn't exist yet. I remember talking about like wasting Trey Galloway's best night of his career and not being able to get the job done. So anyway, yeah, not a fun non-conference slate. It's just, I feel like, and again, this is just me kind of going back reminiscing as a kid. And maybe it's just the simpler times when you're a young fan of a team and just kind of getting your feet wet with, basketball, football, whatever it may be. But I remember loving just watching the non-conference games, and maybe just because the teams were better, more fun to watch. And I mean, I watched some bad Indiana teams. The first three Tom Crean teams were not fun at all to watch, but I was still mesmerized. I think part of that still was just me being a young fan. So that's again an experience that everybody has when they're just now like learning to be a fan of a team and what that means, and what it looks like for yourself, I guess. But I think it was also like, I think part of it too was, and I know I've mentioned this several times the last few weeks, is football this year just took so much away from so much attention away, I should say, from basketball. And I hate that it did that, but I also don't regret any of that. I wouldn't want the football team to regress in future years. I just wish it could be, and maybe it's just kind of all the negative attitude around Indiana basketball right now in general. Like all of the folks, and again, if you're one of these people, that's totally fine. Because again, if you're ready to move on from Mike Woodson right now, I get it. You're fan however you want to fan, without threatening anybody. As long as you're not saying things that are illegal or you know you reasonable human beings know what I'm talking about, right? But yeah, fan however you want to fan. If you're somebody who doesn't even care what happens against Rutgers on Thursday, and you're done with Mike Woodson, as many of you have already said in the comments before, that's totally fine. But I'm going to watch how this season plays out. I don't know exactly where it's going to go. I've mentioned how we're just at this crossroads, and I do think we kind of, as much as I know we don't really learn a lot about Indiana teams or really any team whenever you're playing these non-conference opponents, I do think we learned that this is just life with this head coach, right? Like these teams are going to play to their competition sometimes, and that's not a good thing. But that also means sometimes they're going to turn it on when they know they need to turn it on. And hopefully they get that message whenever Rutgers comes to town on Thursday. And oftentimes we've seen these teams too. Sometimes all it takes is one kind of momentum grabbing win to take you further into, a streak of really good wins that can really propel you forward into the postseason. And potentially for Indiana, a shot at the Big Ten. And I can say that right now still because this team, even though they lost to Nebraska, they do have the talent to do so. And one thing we don't know as well is whether this team has the ability to put everything together in order to make that run in the Big Ten championship. I wouldn't bet on it. I'll say that. And I talk about like not liking all the negativity. I've been negative as well. And I tend to have a negative outlook on the season. But at the same time, I am willing to see how things are going to play out before just kind of hanging it up. Because here's the thing. If I just sat here and complained about Mike Woodson and how the season was over, then what would be the point of doing any of this? What would be the point of breaking down any of the games, kind of talk? And it's also about the players too. Whenever we're wanting to move on to say scrap this, like that's not fair to any of the players that are taking place or taking part in the season. And sometimes, I mean, people will say this, and I agree with this as well. Sometimes the players don't look like they're fully into it. And if that's the case, then that's on them as well. If that's how they want to spend their season, their, I almost said their NIL lifestyle, which I don't really know what I would mean if I'm saying that, but if they want to spend their college basketball career like this, then again, that's their decision as well. That's just the state of college athletics that we're in right now. It's unfortunate to see if that's the case, but I think I'm going to stop this part of the conversation because I'm beginning to go down a path that is not really worth going down right now. But maybe it's something we'll have to revisit here in the future. But for now, non-conference play is over. Indiana will move on to face Rutgers on Thursday and hopefully begin a bit of an upswing in 2025 as this team begins a run at the Big Ten, and then hopefully an at-large berth in the NCAA tournament. One where we're not, like Kyler said, where we're not questioning whether this team's going to get in or not. We don't want another year of being on the bubble because bubbles are not fun. Bubbles are fun when you're a kid and you have the little sticks, right, where you pull out and then you blow the bubbles. Those are the only fun kinds of bubbles, or bubbles in the bathtub. Those bubbles can be fun too, right? All right. Enough being weird. I don't even know. Let's move on to a few other things. Some college basketball results to take note of. UCLA, new member of the Big Ten, dispatched Gonzaga 65-62 over the weekend. Man, apologies. Some of these coughs are just sneaking up on me when I least expect it. But UCLA slowly becoming one of the more consistent teams, if you will, in the Big Ten, knocking off number 14 Gonzaga. Of course, that's Gonzaga's now fourth loss, on the year? Wow. But UCLA 11-2, and Indiana, they don't face UCLA for a while. I don't believe they'll face the Bruins until February. But that will likely be a very tough matchup for Indiana whenever they get to that point in the season. And then a couple of other things I want to take note of. I really just want to talk about, go back to non-conference opponents. Like Indiana's not taking care of business the way that some of the other teams in the Big Ten are. And I know one thing I have not said yet, Winthrop, even though they are in the Big South and they are significantly less talented than Indiana, they are a good team for who they are, because not everybody who is playing non-conference, bye games, if you will, they're not always playing the better, teams in those specific conferences. Like, for example, Illinois played 0-15 Chicago State on Sunday and won 117-64. Like, that is what every team, Indiana would do that. There's a lot of mid-major teams that would probably do that to Chicago State. But Ohio State, even though I believe this was a fight for a little bit, Ohio State was able to beat Indiana State by 20 points, an 8-5 Indiana State team. They beat them 103-83. And then a few other random opponents. Actually, as of this right now, as of this recording, this game will be final by the time the show releases, of course. I'm looking at Michigan beating WKU by nearly 30 points, and it's not even halftime. That's a 9-3 WKU team. And I don't know how strong their 9-3 is, but Winthrop that Indiana faced, they were 10-4, some along those lines as well. And WKU is more than likely a better program than Winthrop, I'll say. But yeah, Michigan taking care of business against them and will likely continue to win this game by 20, 30 points, maybe 40 or 50, depending on what happens. But that's what Indiana's not doing. They're not dispatching. Well, let's go back. Trying to hold in that cough. I want to go back and look at Indiana's non-conference real quick, just against any of the bye game opponents. What was the deficit for each of those games that they played in? All right. SIU Edwardsville, they won by 19 points. Eastern Illinois, a game they were trailing at halftime. They did win that game ultimately by 35. So that's a pretty impressive turnaround in the second half. UNC Greensboro only won by 11. I almost said Providence. Sam Houston, you win by 26. That's what you're supposed to do against those teams. So there you go. Miami of Ohio won by 19. Chattanooga only won by 9. Winthrop only won by 9. So kind of a bit of a split when it comes to the bye games that Indiana participated in during the non-conference. And at least at one point or another during these games, I felt like Indiana was a little too close for comfort. And in particular, one of the weirdest results with all this is Eastern Illinois, when you're down at half and you completely demolish them in the second half. That's how you respond. I guess we haven't seen much of that from Indiana, but that's all over now. As you heard us going through the schedule earlier, January, a big and important month for the Hoosiers as they try to build a resume that is appealing enough to get an at-large bid for the NCAA tournament. Man, yeah, we're getting through this. I'm enjoying. I don't want to seem like I'm complaining. I do hate that I'm coughing, but I am enjoying being here with you all here on a Monday, whatever you guys are doing as we get ready to get to the new year. Hopefully you guys are enjoying yourselves and have enjoyed the holiday season. I've enjoyed the holiday season, but I am ready for things to get back to normal for me. I don't like all this adjusted schedule. I'm sure many of you have had to adjust your schedules as well in one way, shape, or form, and I'm sure it's not fun. I mean, maybe it's adjusted in a good way. I've said before, maybe you're somebody who is who's had the privilege of being off for these last couple of weeks, and if so, I envy you. But I hope you're enjoying it and savoring it in every way that you can. I'm going to go through some of these bowl results. Not a bunch, but I do want to mention a few of them. And we're going to end with the Pop-Tarts Bowl because I got some things to say about the Pop-Tarts Bowl. BYU and Colorado played each other in their conference opponents, and they play each other in the Valero Alamo Bowl. That's just weird, and I know that has to do with former bowl ties for their former conferences, but it's just odd that that couldn't be scrapped, and you still have to play interconference for a bowl game. And I don't think they played in the regular season. I don't know, but BYU kills Colorado 36-14. Heck of a result there. UConn, an FBS team that's kind of been the laughing stock over the last several years. They finished the season 9-4 and beat North Carolina 27-14 in the Fenway Bowl. I don't believe that game was coached by Bill Belichick. I feel like if it was, I would have heard something about it, but yeah, I'm assuming it was probably the interim head coach for North Carolina. Nebraska gets their first bowl win. Just, they hadn't been in 10 years, so I don't know how long it's been since they won a bowl. But they beat Boston College 20-15 in the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. A lot of B and P popping right there, if you like. We'll do it one more time. The Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. That's just fun to do. I don't know how appealing it is to listen to, but yeah, say that to yourself and have a good time. We're going to do it one more time. The Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. Shout out to the Cornhuskers for winning that game 20-15. Some of you may have thought that was a very weird segment, but I had fun doing it. And I hope you said it along with me because it is fun. And you know it is. You know it's fun. All right, let's get into this Pop-Tarts Bowl, okay? And I'm not here to break down the game. I'm here to really just talk about what the Pop-Tarts Bowl has been able to do and how well they do marketing that bowl game. All right, so you had this game. It's Iowa State and Miami, two teams that were competing for a spot in the college football playoff, right? And they end up just coming up just a little bit short. Miami, and Iowa State had a few more blemishes on their schedule than they would have liked. And so they get snuffed from the college football playoff. And instead, their consolation is playing in the now famous, I can say that now, I feel like, after, I believe this is the second year of this bowl, at least, maybe third year, the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It's a bowl game when you think about it. If you just say, hey, you're going to the Pop-Tarts Bowl, it sounds like complete nonsense. Why would anybody want to play in that game? Why is this even a sponsor of a college football game? This is a breakfast treat for children. Why is this the sponsor of a bowl game? Well, they have managed, the people behind this bowl game, I don't know who they are, but they do such a great job at having fun with everything that I think it kind of, like, the players love it. It seems like the coaches, I don't want to speak for the coaches, obviously. Players love it. The fans love it. There's so much reaction to it on social media, I feel like, about the Pop-Tarts Bowl that it seems like outside of the college football playoff, this is now the bowl game that people pay attention to the most just because of how well they do of marketing it. They have the Pop-Tart mascots doing a whole bunch of goofy things on the field. They're doing the coin toss. They're sneaking up on referees and scaring them or trying to scare them. And then to top it all off, at the very end of the game, they put one of the mascot Pop-Tarts on top of this giant fake toaster, of course. And I think this year, I think I talked about this with Drew. You got to vote on which Pop-Tart flavor was going to be the one that the champions of the game consumed. Therefore, that being the Pop-Tart mascot that gets dipped into the toaster. And we're going to have a cough break again real quick because this is getting out of hand with my voice. Apologies. We're getting there. We're almost done. But again, back to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. The Pop-Tart flavor that wins the vote is the one that gets dunked, or whatever you want to call it, lowered into the toaster. And in doing so, this Pop-Tart, so I'm looking at the Pop-Tarts Bowl Twitter account right now. The caption for this video of the Pop-Tart getting lowered into the toaster says, "Mouth Heaven gained another angel," with a blue heart. And I can't play the audio, but I'm going to describe what happens here in case you have not seen this yourself. The Pop-Tart, it's the cinnamon roll Pop-Tart, is holding up a sign that says, "Follow your dreams," and he's waving to everybody as he's getting lowered into the toaster that is, of course, killing him. And then the real Pop-Tart pops out, the cinnamon roll flavor for all the players to eat in celebration of their win. And one of the comments on Twitter says, "That Pop-Tart's dream was death?" ? And the Pop-Tarts Bowl Twitter account responds with, "All Pop-Tarts want one thing more than anything else in life: to be eaten." This is this is absolute insanity going on. And the follow-up comment from somebody else says it's like their Valhalla. And I had to look up, I'll admit this, I had to look up what he meant by that. I could tell that it was a funny comment, but I didn't know exactly what he was referring to when he said it's like their Valhalla. But apparently, for those uneducated like me, Valhalla is where in Norse mythology, like the Vikings, they would fight to be able to have the privilege to go on to fight with Odin or something in death. I don't know. I don't have it right in front of me at the moment, but still a very interesting comment. And probably just embarrass myself trying to describe what that was. But hey, that's the nature of the show, right? We embarrass ourselves, even if we don't really embarrass ourselves at all. That's just what we do. Excuse me. But yeah, that's the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It's fun. If Indiana ever gets to play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, I'd be happy about it. Hopefully they'll get to do that someday if they're not in the college football playoff again. All right. All right, we're gonna go real quickly because my voice is beginning to give out, and at this point we're getting close to an hour. I do want to share brief thoughts on who I think is going to win each college football playoff quarterfinal matchup. We'll go in order in which they will be played. So the Fiesta Bowl between Penn State and Boise State be on New Year's Eve at 7:30. I was going to say that game will go into the new year, but it won't. But I think this is going to be a closer game than people imagine it being. I think Ashton Genty is going to do what he does against a good opponent. We saw Boise State against Oregon early on in the year, so things have definitely changed for a lot of teams. But I think Boise State will be competitive in this game. I'm not predicting, I was going to say the outright upset, but I guess by seeding it wouldn't be an upset if Boise State won. But I think this will be a competitive game. But ultimately, I think Penn State gets the job done. Penn State feels like they are peaking at the right time with their performance against Oregon, following that up by completely demolishing SMU. I think Penn State moves on to the semifinals and will take on, well, I was going to move on to the next game, but we'll talk about that game at the end because I'm going in order of the games that will be played. But next we've got, maybe I'll stop saying things so quickly. Next, we've got Texas and Arizona State. I feel like a lot of people writing off Arizona State in this game. And I think Arizona State, much like Boise State, has the ability to put up a fight and potentially win this one. And I don't know exactly what I'm going to bet on these games yet either, by the way. But I kind of like Arizona State. They looked really, really good in their Big 12 championship game against Iowa State. And Texas, even though they did good against Clemson, Texas at times, they kind of make you wonder, were there points in the season where they were overrated? Like, are they as good as the ranking says? I think they may be a little too heavily favored in this game, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. I like Arizona State to win this game, but maybe I'll eat that and on Friday talk about them getting killed. Who knows? Let's move on to the Big Ten matchup, Ohio State and Oregon. Man, it's a shame that this game has to happen when it does. And it's all because Ohio State couldn't get it done against Michigan, or else Ohio State would likely be the 5 seed, and they wouldn't have to play this game right now. But nonetheless, this is how things played out. This is tough. Ohio State completely dismantled Tennessee, and I'm sure they're going to ride a lot of that momentum into this game, especially feeling like it's unfinished business with the way that they lost on the road against Oregon last time. And I'm sure Oregon will be feeling that pressure. I think it'll be another competitive game, but my mind is leaning toward Ohio State right now. So that's what I'm going to go with. And then finally, the game that unfortunately Indiana will not be playing in because they lost to Notre Dame. We'll be taking on Georgia. I'm pretty upset happy today, aren't I? I think this is just me wanting it to happen. I do think it can, but I don't know how realistic it actually is. I shouldn't say like I'm just making it seem like it's impossible. Like the spread's only 1.5 in favor of Georgia, but I think Notre Dame wins. Georgia's been kind of like the drama team of the year. There's a lot of drama teams, especially in the SEC. But Kirby Smart likes to act like everyone's against him and yada, yada, yada. I think Notre Dame's feeling good, though, right now after their win against Indiana. And I think they'll carry that momentum into Georgia. I feel like I just said the same thing I said about Ohio State. But also, I think Georgia's very beatable. If this were Indiana playing Georgia, I'd probably pick Indiana to beat Georgia. I just don't believe in the Bulldogs for whatever reason. So that's what I think is going to happen. Do with that what you will. Probably nothing because I'm just your average Joe talking about sports behind a microphone at his house in an office. And yeah, we'll wrap up today's show with that. Hope you had a good time. I had a good time, even though I had to stave off a few coughs every now and again. Hopefully we'll be feeling better before Friday's show later this week. And hopefully you have a happy new year. Looking forward to seeing you in 2025. And I've enjoyed every moment as best I could. Of course, more often than not, enjoyed it. And I look forward to many more shows heading into 2025 and beyond. So until next time, be sure to follow us on Twitter. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube and check out everything going on at HoosierIllustrated.com. Until Friday, this has been another episode of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com.